In 1963, the world was watching as our president visited Dallas on a sunny November afternoon. The crowds cheered until 3 shots rang out. Was it a lone gunman or a sinister plot by our own government? Today's episode is The Assassination of John F. Kennedy.
A bump in the night, your heart fills with dread. Probably a murderer who wants you dead. It could be a ghost, a demon, or worse. Perhaps you're the victim of a witch's curse. It's hopeless, you're doomed. You'd call a priest if you could. You'd rather just listen to who? Sinisterhood.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to our last episode where we had the moral quandary of
About
does
Ted
this
Kennedy.
define Ted Kennedy?
Oh, yeah. Have you been thinking about Ted Kennedy?
I have, and I had a conversation with Tommy about it, and I have decided that I do not think that defines Ted Kennedy.
Wow.
Yes.
I had a discussion. I have an all-female comedian group chat, and we weren't necessarily talking about Ted Kennedy, but we were definitely, like, Louis C.K. will just, like, pop up now at the comedy cellar or whatever.
Fucking walk out and demand my money back if he did that shit.
He did it, like, people didn't buy tickets to see him. They bought,
yeah, I know. Dalton Pruitt was one recently.
And so we were talking about that of, like, if you come out and say, oh, man, I had kind of a bad year, you don't deserve forgiveness versus someone comes out and says, oh my God, I did this horrible thing and I deeply regret it. I am genuinely apologizing and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm just telling you what I did. Mm-hmm. But to some of their points in the chat, they were saying, he did know what he was doing. He knew it was bad. He did it for 10 years.
Louis C.K. Oh, yeah,
he did it for 10 years. His whole camp covered up for him. Mm-hmm. And this is from, I'm Heather, and a girl who deeply loved Louis C.K. Like my old work, that was like a bit that I wanted to marry Louis C.K. and I loved him. I thought he was so cute and so funny. And yeah, everybody was cringing that I thought Louis C.K. was cute. I just sort of, you know what? I got to type.
Yeah, no, I can see it in a slovenly, funny way. He is
just sort of like a grungily dressed comedian.
I saw him live.
With a beard.
He was great. I mean, despite all this shit he's done, that doesn't mean he's not funny.
Yeah,
he's still a funny person. He's just a known piece of shit.
So then in that case, does that define you? It's a prolonged period of just horrible behavior with no remorse.
Yeah. To me, with Louis C.K., I won't ever forgive that. So I'm not going to be a fan ever again.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, like he had a prolonged period of bad actions with no remorse, and the only time he sort of apologized was when he was like red-handed caught.
Yeah, and he was
shitty.
like, I'm got to do something to get a career back.
Yeah. So, I don't know. And we've revealed what it is. But I'm glad you were thinking about Ted Kennedy.
I was. And to your point a minute ago about people filming stuff, when I was reading about our topic today, the assassination of JFK, the only film that they had was the now famous Zapruder film. And think about now if something like this was to happen.
There would be phone angles.
Holy shit. I mean, there wouldn't even be a ton of questions.
That's true.
Because everything would have been documented.
It's like live streams.
Yeah, except the fact that you can't document the government plotting a cover-up to kill our president.
Well, and you know what? There's been quite a trail of evidence.
Oh, yeah.
A lot more things have been released, in 1995 and then again last year with the JFK, what is it? Access Act or whatever. So there's more information out than before, but
well, I'm Christy.
I'm Heather.
Today we are discussing the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We're going to break this up into 2 parts.
Which isn't even enough.
No, really. I was like, God, you could do, I mean, and there are podcasts entirely dedicated to this topic, but
here's the thing.
this could be a year-long podcast.
Yeah, I have a short attention span, and the reason why I listen to podcasts is that I want someone else to do a bunch of research and then just regurgitate it back to me in a condensed format. Mm-hmm. So you know what, you guys, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
I just went to Philadelphia for work, If you follow me on Instagram, you saw me wearing an Eagles hat.
Yeah.
I apologize for that, for my treason, but I was very cold.
How cold was it there?
It was nippy the first day, and then it turned off nice. So
it
was super cold the first day, and that's why I wore the hat, and then it turned off better. But on the plane ride there, I got paid for the upgrade because my company paid for the flight, so I just paid for the upgrade to get exit row because I wanted more leg room, and I knew it's 3 hours. And they give you, fun fact on American Airlines, unlimited alcohol if you are in the exit row. Why?
Is that the lane where you're supposed to help people if shit goes down?
Yeah, they made me take my headphones off, and they're like, in the event of an emergency, are you willing, able, and, you're
like, I don't know, how many Jack and Cokes have you given me so
unlimited
far?
Tito's. I was like, hell yeah, bitch, I'll fly the plane, Sully Sullenberg. Let me get some of that. Yeah, so I just was like, oh, may I have like a screwdriver? The lady next to me is like, 2 bottles of Tito's, and her husband's like 2 Bud Lights. I was like, good God.
I respect that.
But anyhow, so I was sitting with my iPad, and I was watching all these JFK documentaries they're on Netflix, and we'll put them in the show notes. They're very graphic. There was like literal like footage of the Zapruder footage, and then there was Autopsy, the one like autopsy photo, and just
with his throat.
Yeah, there was and the lady next to me, Miss Double Tito's, was just like, and I had a notebook out and was scratched, so I've probably been reported that she's plotting something.
Yeah, taking notes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to jail.
Well, this first episode, we're going to focus on the assassination and what took place that day. And then next week will be conspiracy theories.
My favorite. And it's going to be really hard for me this whole episode not to be like, no.
Well, I mean, so Heather and I are in agreement for once on a conspiracy theory that
it was
the government definitely had something, if not everything, to do with this.
But your timeline that we created today, I say we, Christy did all the work. The timeline that you created today is following the official story.
The official
I use
story.
Air quotes.
Yes, what was officially
what you're taught in school
by the Warren Commission. That is, what we're taught to believe.
The Warren Commission is so problematic. I'll save it all for episode 2. But talk about putting the foxes in charge of the hen house. Oh my God.
Yeah. That could also be an entire podcast.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. On November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy, his wife Jackie, and Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson and his wife Lady Bird. What was her real name?
I think it's like Maureen, but Lady Bird's a really good name.
You like it?
Oh, yeah.
I don't like her, so...
Wait, you don't like Lady Bird?
No.
Hot take, why do you not like her?
Because in several of the documentaries I've been watching...
Claudia,
she just doesn't seem appropriately morose. I think part of her is like, oh, I'm now the first lady, and really the whole Johnson campaign, his whole team, when he was getting sworn in, and we'll get into it, they kind of were like, all right, peace out, Kennedy team, y'all are
get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it was just immediately like they were pushed out, and the Johnson administration was now in. It was,
she's a bit of a pearl clutcher, and she's got a face that looks like she's just smelled a fart constantly.
Very much so. Which, I mean, he was older, maybe so.
Maybe he will.
You know how some old people just always smell like farts?
I would do an entire episode on LBJ just based on those tapes of him getting it fitted for pants, and he's like, I need some help because my pocket's too shallow and my knife keeps falling out. And you're like, that's the President of the United States. His knife is so big that it can't fit in trouser pockets.
Fit in his pants.
And he's like, I need a little bit more room from where my balls hang around to my bunghole. Like, yeah, okay, bunghole.
He needs them nice and loose.
He
also,
needs TV for your bunghole.
They were from Texas.
That's right.
So all of them arrived in Dallas, Texas, as part of a 5-day Texas tour. This was Jackie's first public appearance since her son Patrick's death 3 months earlier, which we talked about in the last episode.
In the curse episode.
Yes. Kennedy was hoping to accomplish 3 goals during his Texas tour.
Don't die.
Yeah, that was always a goal. Unfortunately, he didn't meet that one on this one. So the first one was to begin his quest for re-election in 1964, to raise campaign funds for said election, and to help smooth things over between the Democratic Party and a very conservative Texas. Kennedy and Johnson had barely won Texas in 1960 and actually lost Dallas. So there was a lot of this is not our territory.
Well, and
we
it's
got to make amends here.
You can't really talk about the JFK assassination or really anything JFK without talking just about like the political climate at the time. And they got Johnson to run because Kennedy was so young, so progressive. Johnson was like a lifelong politician, Southern,
old,
could get the oil money to back up the campaign. And then again, like I said, you get these. JFK was amazing. Okay, he did a lot of amazing things as president, but he was super progressive. And he's like, you know what we need to do is some oil money. Those people just need to get taxed more.
Yeah,
and they're like, what did you just
and
say
Texas
to me?
Is like,
you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So he sort of turned on the people that he didn't even ask for their help to get him into office, but they were like, oh, well, we want LBJ in office, and no one's going to hire LBJ in his bunghole to go to the White House. But, if you pair him with this handsome, young, beloved
which
young
is
man,
what the vice president's job really is. Yeah. He's never going to be president. He's just there to
theoretically
make the president. Yeah, well, although this one did become president. Also, it was said that when JFK and Jackie landed in Dallas, that JFK turned to her and said, we're heading into nut country. Because a bunch of gun-wielding, conservative crazies.
Well, he wasn't wrong.
No, he wasn't. Well, after a successful presidential breakfast in Fort Worth, which is where I grew up.
There you go. You didn't kill the president.
I didn't. I was not alive. JFK.
No, I just meant your city didn't.
Oh, yes. But also, I did not. JFK, Jackie, LBJ, and the Lady Bird headed to Air Force One and made a short 15-minute flight from Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth to Love Field in Dallas. First of all, how extra is it that they straight up flew from Fort Worth to Dallas? For those of you that aren't from this area, we could drive to Fort Worth in about 45 minutes.
Correct. However, if you've ever driven on 20 or 30, I would much rather fly.
Yeah, and I guess you have to get the plane
That's what I was thinking
to Dallas, but it's just like you would spend more time getting to the plane, getting on the plane, getting everything situated than if you just drove the freaking limo.
That's what I was thinking. They said
Dallas.
15-minute flight, and I'm like, there's not even any way it was 15 minutes. It was probably like 8 minutes. And like it's probably like 4 minutes for takeoff, 5 minutes to fly, and 5 minutes to land. I mean, it's like...
I can't imagine they ever even got to 30,000 feet or however high you're supposed to be. So at 11:40 a.m., the presidential motorcade departed Love Field and headed for the Dallas Trade Mart, where a luncheon where President Kennedy would meet with civic and business leaders was scheduled. 45 minutes had been allotted for the trip. So they were allotting for 45 minutes. In reality, Love Field to the Dallas Mart, what is that? Probably a 15, 20-minute drive?
It's basically kind of a straight shot, actually. But I guess they were allotting to kind of do a little mini tour.
And they knew they were going to be going like 10 to 20 miles per hour.
Slowly.
They were scheduling this out so it could be everyone could come out and look and wave and take pictures as they drove by. And it was a big political... What is the word I'm looking for?
Well, it's like a lot of fanfare. And
yeah,
it was like
fanfare.
Because he got elected on this great wave of like he was super popular and he was handsome and young and everyone loved him. And then he got into office.
And everyone loved Jackie too.
Correct. And he got into office and then you had this huge Red Scare where it was like the Soviets are getting nuclear weapons and then he's trying to negotiate maybe disarmament, so then the country's kind of split, and then the country actually started really siding with him too, of like, yeah, we don't want to die in a nuclear blast either. You had the whole Bay of Pigs situation in Cuba where there's nuclear weapons 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The Castro's starting to take over. He's starting to get big. This threat of, okay, well, if Russia can take Cuba, can then they take Florida? Can they take,
which is still a concern for a lot of people.
So he started out the super popular, like everybody loved him president, and then basically 3 years into it, the question is, is he still as popular as he was before, especially in the state where he barely won, in a city where he didn't win. Right. So they're like, oh, yeah, let's come. It's your chance to see the president. Aren't you excited? Don't you want to vote for him?
I remember when I was in high school, Clinton came to Fort Worth.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so I didn't get out of school to go see him.
Yeah.
Y'all know Monica Lewinsky? Yeah, that was my
secret identity.
But several of my friends left school and went downtown to where he was speaking.
Do you regret not going?
I do. Yeah. I was thinking today, watching this. At the time, I was 16. I was like, oh, whatever. This isn't. Who cares? But all the people that were children or 16 or adults that saw this, like that day is forever. I mean, granted, nothing catastrophic happened when Clinton came.
Yeah.
But you still will remember that. You'll always remember, like, seeing a president speak, regardless of, like, your political affiliation.
Well, in, like, 2007, my mom and her friend were going to go to Reunion Arena and see the senator talk. And everyone's all excited. And she's like, do you want to go? It could be history. And I was like, you're stupid, Mom. Shut up. It was Barack Obama.
Oh, shit.
Idiot.
Yeah. So, just a life lesson. If you ever have the chance to go see anyone that's in a president or a senator or anything speak, go do it. I didn't see Beto when he came through, and I wish I had.
Yeah, same. He was in Mesquite. I should have gone, but
he was in Deep Ellum too.
God damn it.
Well, Secret Service agents Winston G. Lawson and Forrest V. Sorrells had been the most active in planning the motorcade route and had driven it just 2 weeks before in order to finalize plans. From Love Field, the route passed through a suburban section of Dallas, through downtown along Main Street, and finally to the Trade Mart via a short segment of the Simmons Freeway. This route was chosen in order to provide the maximum building and crowd views and was widely reported in Dallas newspapers days before the event for people that wanted to attend. We were talking before we started recording about how this is not something that would even happen nowadays. No. I mean, Trump is not going to get into a convertible and be driven around downtown.
No, not even.
But even, I mean, they put the exact route he was taking all over the newspapers and TV and everything.
When they opened the George W. Bush Presidential Museum and all the living presidents and first ladies came, so it was like H.W., Jimmy Carter. I get those mixed up. Dan Aykroyd played both of them on Center last night.
That's easy to do.
Jimmy Carter and, H.W., actual Bush, and then Obama and Clinton were all there. And they had snipers so the George W. Bush Museum and Library is at Mockingbird and 75 on one side of the highway. They had snipers in a friend of mine's office. They were like, you can't be in your office today. The Secret Service is going to be in here. Across the highway. Yeah. I mean, it's like they think of every possible angle. Yeah.
When Obama was here a few years ago, I was stuck in traffic, like standstill traffic, for about 45 minutes because they block off the highways.
Yeah, I remember. I just worked late. I was like, I just won't leave today.
Yeah, Trump was here not too long ago and the same thing. I was like, what the hell's going on? They're like, the president's in town. Yeah, so you can't even drive around, let alone walk down to where they're going to be.
On one of those documentaries, there was a lady that she was like 15 or 16 at the time. She was on the curb.
Yeah.
She probably could have, if she took 2 steps forward, high-fived him.
Put her hand on the car.
High-fived him.
Yeah.
And just was standing there. There were like no barricades.
Yeah.
Maybe in the 1960s, people behaved themselves a little bit more.
Well, I do agree with that. But also when he left the presidential breakfast and went outside to get into his car, people were right on the curb. I mean, children, families,
5 feet away.
There was nothing stopping. And people back then didn't get patted down. There weren't metal detectors or anything you walked through.
No, it wasn't a controlled area at all. It was literally just the public, and you just could walk up and stand on the sidewalk, and you could have thrown an egg or a grenade.
Yeah, which it's insane. And when that's what I was going to say. When he left Fort Worth and got into the car, he did something unprecedented where he went out into the crowd.
Oh God! And the
he
Secret
and Jackie
Service
both,
was like...
and the Secret Service was freaking out. But at the same time, they were like, "There are so many people here that it would be hard for someone to come up and attack him because they'd have to get through so many people." Well, snipers don't have to get through a lot of people.
Or also, who knows? You could stab him. You could look at RFK. He was going through a tiny kitchen.
Yeah. It's wild that.
Well, I think it was just
such little precaution was taken.
And it just sort of was unprecedented.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't... I mean, I guess Abraham Lincoln...
Well, back in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, there had been assassinations, but...
My apologies for my ignorance, but how did the other 2 presidents die?
Shooting.
They shot... Okay.
Yeah.
Because Abraham Lincoln was direct... I mean, it was blood...
Yeah, all 3 of them were killed. Every president that's been assassinated have been shot. Garfield, I believe, was shot in the stomach.
Okay, for my ignorance, you're telling me McKinley and Garfield
were both shot.
but died from complications and infections and not anything that was...
They did not die at the time.
At the scene.
They each died weeks, if not months later.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It is tough, yeah. So I guess they're like, well, I'll put on my tinfoil hat. If you're like, we know that this is going to happen, then we don't really care how much security we're providing the president, because at the end of the day, he's going to get killed anyways.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was a plot by the CIA.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But if you,
we'll get into it
if
in the
that
next episode.
wasn't happening, the lack of consideration they took for his safety is kind of outstanding.
In Houston and in every other city, he had motorcycles that were all around him that, protect. I don't know that would protect you from a sniper, but yeah, they have this bubble that's supposed to save him, not just from the rain. It was like, that's a don't shoot the president bubble.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know what, man, it's really nice. Don't you want to leave the bubble off?
Well, it had been raining that morning in Fort Worth, but it cleared up by the time they arrived in Dallas. The skies were clear, the sun was out, and it was 67 degrees.
It's a nice day.
It sounds kind of like the day we had today. It might have been a little cooler. A custom bubble top had been made for the president's convertible. But because the weather was so nice, it was decided they would not use it and would instead ride with the top down.
Oh, is that what they decided?
But again, like, what if it had been pouring down rain?
They would have probably shot him in another city.
Do you think that they were just like, whenever we have an opportunity, take it?
Dallas was, it was planned in advance.
Right, but I'm saying, like, the weather that you can't plan.
Correct, yeah.
Could have fucked it all up.
Oh, absolutely. And in which case, they could have shot him in the kitchen of the Trade Mart, or you know what I mean? They could have.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see, yeah. He was scheduled to go to Austin that evening.
Yeah, they could have done it in Austin.
And then somewhere else the next day. So, yeah, I mean, there were other opportunities as well. Well, at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, the motorcade entered Dealey Plaza, which, for those of you that aren't from here, Dealey Plaza is the area in which Elm and Houston Street and all of this takes place, where the grassy knoll is and the Texas Book Depository.
When I was a little girl, my mom would say, if you're driving downtown, there's Commerce, Main, and Elm. It's the three main streets. Mm-hmm. Commerce goes one way, Elm goes the other way, and Main goes both ways. Main's in the middle. And so it's like these three, people who are from real cities that have like a grid system with like numbered streets of like the numbers go north to south and then the letters go east to west. We don't have that here. But in downtown, we have Commerce, Main, and Elm. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch of whatnot crazy other streets that cross it. And he's coming down those three streets feed from one end of downtown, the highways, to the other highway on the other end of downtown.
Yes. So at the front of the motorcade was an unmarked white Ford, occupied by Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry, Sheriff Bill Decker, and Winston Lawson and Forrest Sorrells, the special service agents that had designed this motorcade route. Following them was President Kennedy's 1961 Lincoln Continental convertible. In addition to the president, this car also contained Governor John Connelly, his wife Nellie, and Jackie Kennedy. Bringing up the rear was a 1955 Cadillac convertible, which held several more Secret Service agents and presidential aides. Running alongside the cars and on the running boards were even more Secret Service agents, including Jackie Kennedy's personal bodyguard, Clint Hill. Between 150,000 to 200,000 people had come out to witness history as the president and the first lady passed by. By all eyewitness accounts, pictures, and film, it shows that they started out in great spirits. As the motorcade turned left onto Elm Street, Nellie Connelly turned back to President Kennedy and said,
"Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you."
To which he replied,
"No, you certainly can't."
These would be the last words he would ever say. Moments later, as the convertible passed by the Texas School Book Depository, shots rang out.
When I was in 6th grade, we took a field trip to the Texas Book Depository, and they don't let you get directly in the window that Lee Harvey Oswald was supposedly in. There's like a glass box around it. But even from the next window over, there's just no way.
You're like,
no way.
No matter how good a shot you are, this would not
Maybe
happen.
now, if you had like a digital scope and like a good rifle, you had a shitty rifle. But and also for anybody who wants to come to Texas, they have a whole museum.
6th floor museum is great, and there's a little replica of the window that has all the little boxes set up and the gun and everything.
You can look at what it looked like.
So, there are many different accounts of how many shots were fired, from where the shots came, and how many shooters there were. Like we said, we're going to just talk about what the Warren Commission put out as the official report in this episode. 80% of the people that were there that day report hearing 3 shots fired.
That includes police officers, lay people, FBI agents. Yes. I mean, it's not just a couple people. It's just dozens and dozens and dozens
hundreds
of people.
And hundreds, yeah. According to the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Kennedy was waving to the crowds on his right with his right arm upraised on the side of the convertible when a shot entered his upper back, penetrated his neck, and slightly damaged a spinal vertebrae and the top of his right lung.
This is all a lie.
The bullet then exited just beneath his larynx and nicked the left side of his suit tie knot. He raised his elbows and clenched his fist in front of his face and neck, then leaned forward and to the left. I gotta say, the whole time I was reading this, all I could think about was that Seinfeld. With Keith Hernandez and the Magic Loogie.
I met Keith Hernandez and I just was like, "You're on Seinfeld."
Did you say that?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He was just like, "Yeah, I was."
That's exactly what I would have said too.
He's just a nice guy. It was just like, I care nothing about baseball. For those who haven't watched Seinfeld, there's an episode where Kramer and Newman were at a Dodger game and they talk shit to Keith Hernandez for missing some hit, and then he supposedly spit on them, and then they do this whole reenactment like the Kennedy Zapruder film. And
which is great because Newman, the actor that plays Newman, was in Oliver Stone's JFK too. Yeah. So it was very fun.
So the head supposedly goes forward and
to the left. And in the Zapruder film, you clearly, and all the photos taken, you do clearly see JFK like bring his hands up to his throat and just this look of like sheer what the fuck just happened on his face. And Jackie kind of turns to him, and she wasn't even really sure what was going on because everyone, her and almost all of the Secret Service, thought it was just the crowd was throwing firecrackers,
or thought it was a car backfiring. She said she thought it was a car backfiring. Definitely.
And she, in documentaries I've watched, she was like, "What is happening?" And then the second shot rings out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Warren Commission goes on to say that Governor Connelly was also hit. Here we go. By the same bullet that hit JFK, the first shot, as it penetrated his back just below his right armpit, destroying 4 inches of his right fifth rib. It then exited his chest just below his right nipple and struck his arm just above his right wrist, cleanly shattering his right radius bone into 8 pieces. The bullet then exited just below the wrist at the inner side of his right palm and finally lodged in his left inner thigh. This would become known as the single bullet theory.
It is also completely scientifically impossible and an insane thing to think.
It is so crazy that a governing body was like, just tell him what we can tell him. It was just one bullet. And
then we'll get into it in the next episode, but as Connelly is on a stretcher, one of the agents that is in the room with him go, oh, look, a bullet's on the stretcher with you. This must be the bullet that came out of your body. And there's no striations. Yeah. It's never been fired from a
clean bullet.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, oopsie. I wonder how this bullet got here.
Well, when the second shot rings out, Connelly, by all accounts of everyone that survived that was in the car, was yelling, "Oh my God, they're going to kill us all."
Oh, yeah.
There's so many times where it was like, they're going to kill us all. Or
they got us.
Yeah, or like these, like, who's they? Who's there? You know, so when the people that are being attacked, their first thought is it's to go to that. There's something to be said for that.
And I will say, and we'll get into the next one too, JFK was like fully prepared to die. Like he really felt like he was going to get taken out one way or the other.
And poor Jackie, when I think the third bullet is what got him in the head. But she's just sitting there like looking, cradling her freaking husband's head in her lap. Well, the 2 investigative committees, the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee, concluded that the second shot to hit the president entered the rear of his head. However, the House Select Committee placed the entry wound 4 inches higher than the Warren Commission placed it, which I don't understand that. How can there be any discrepancy when you can see where the bullet entered?
It's almost like they're making stuff up.
It's almost like someone destroyed all the autopsy pictures and replaced them with artist rendering, and there's no documentation.
It's almost like
what really happened.
They shoved the Dallas medical examiner out of the way and said, "You will not look at this body. Get out of the way."
Well, the fatal shot sent Kennedy's brain matter and skull fragments all over the car and his fellow passengers. Jackie would refuse to change out of her blood-soaked clothes for the rest of the day. It said in this documentary, and we'll put in there, I believe this one was called JFK, The Lost Assassination Tapes, but people kept asking her, like, it's making everyone really uncomfortable that you're still in the suit, that your husband's brain was splattered all over. Can you change into what you were wearing the day before in San Antonio? And she was like,
eat my asshole? My husband just got shot.
She said, no, I want the world to see what they did to him. Again, what they did to him. Everyone knows. They all were like, yep, it's happened.
Like months before this happened, Dwight Eisenhower wrote a New York Times op-ed that was like, the CIA is out of control. They're a fourth branch of unchecked power. They are doing their own thing. There's no stopping them. And that wasn't lost on JFK. He also didn't listen to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on a lot of political moves that they disagreed with. And he's like, this could get me killed.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
And he had said before, if anyone wanted to kill him, it would be a point-blank sniper bullet
to
the head. Yeah, that's how they could take him out. Well, like we said, when the first shot was fired, most of the Secret Service, who was riding in cars behind, thought someone was just setting off firecrackers or a car backfired. Clint Hill, who was Jackie Kennedy's personal bodyguard, is the only one that realized the president had been shot because he saw him clutching his throat. Clint Hill ran to the convertible and frantically climbed onto the back of it as Jackie reached out her hands and climbed towards him. And everyone has seen this classic footage. He thought at the time she was trying to retrieve part of her husband's brain on the trunk of the car. Gosh. And Governor Connelly and his wife said they both said she was screaming, I have his brain. I'm holding his brains in my hand. Yeah. Can you imagine? I can't even, Sans seeing the same thing happen to your child, I honestly don't think you could witness a worse thing in life.
Absolutely not. And they talk about, in law school, they talk about, like, damages when, say, like, you're standing on the sidewalk and you see, a family member or a child or whatever hit by a car, that you can you can get damages for the mental anguish. Yeah. And when it's someone that's as close as a husband or a child, you genuinely do feel a physiological reaction to that trauma and pain.
Yeah. She was in such shock. She's just thinking, gather his bits and pieces.
Maybe we can put it back together.
Exactly. And she was, even after that shot hit him in the head, she was clutching his head saying, Jack, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you okay? Like, you're in such shock it doesn't even register with you really what's happened. And that's our body's way of protecting us, because we would just fucking go insane right there.
Have a heart attack.
Yeah. Well, Hill gets her back into the car, and it speeds off to Parkland Hospital, which is 6 minutes away. Upon arrival at the hospital, the president was immediately taken into surgery, where a tracheotomy and cardiopulmonary resuscitation were performed. However, it was pointless, as the staff at Parkland had declared his condition as moribund upon arrival, which means there was no saving him. He was dead once he showed up.
Yeah, they said they hooked him up to, like, the most, absolutely, like, most technologically
you
advanced.
have to.
Well, they hooked him up to the most advanced machine to be like, is there any chance of still a heartbeat? Yeah. And they said once they put him on that, they're like, this would detect even if you, you were...
The slightest movement,
and there's nothing.
Yeah, even if he shows up, as he did with his head blown off, he's the president. You've got to
try
at least fake that you're doing something.
And I think the staff at Parkland genuinely were.
Hell yeah.
And they wanted to do everything by the book and do it properly. Yes. And that's why the medical examiner's like, okay, well, someone was killed in Dallas, and my job is to perform an autopsy. And the Secret Service is like, the fuck out of the way, we're taking him away. And he's like, excuse me, I just need to quickly. And they're like, nope, move. And they take the body away.
And for those that aren't from here, Parkland is actually a very terrible hospital, but they have the best trauma unit in the state, if not the one in the country. But it's a county.
It's a county hospital, so it doesn't have a lot of funding. Yeah. It is attached to UT Southwestern, which is a teaching and a research hospital. But yet, if you and people are like, I got a job at Parkland in the ER, and people are like, Parkland's a loser hospital. You have to be excellent to get into Parkland ER, especially as a doctor. If
something happened to Heather or I, we would not want to go to Parkland.
No.
That would not be our first hospital.
I would want to go to UT Southwestern.
No, I would probably want to go to Baylor at present.
Really?
I don't know.
You would want to go to Baylor where they let Dr. Death kill a bunch of people and they didn't do anything about it?
No, that was at Medical City.
Nope, that was also at Baylor.
Baylor Plano.
It was the Baylor system made the decision not to.
Well,
but yes, UT Southwestern forever.
They have a great maternity ward.
At Medical City is where both my nieces were born.
Oh.
That's a really uninteresting aside for people that don't live in Dallas.
Yeah. Well, Jackie wanted to be let into the trauma room to remain by her husband's side.
Same.
But was not allowed.
Same. I would have been
like, oh, hell yeah.
I would have been like, you know what? Pull me out of here.
Well, they wouldn't let her. And she was quoted as saying, how can I see anything worse than what I've already seen? Which I'm like, yeah, you just saw your husband's head get blown off. Come on in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's beyond repair anyways. Spend every moment
Last
you can.
Second, yeah. And it's not like she's going to do anything to mess it up.
No. At 12:55 p.m., 2 priests were called to the room to perform the last rites.
Can you believe that is the priest? That you're the priest that
God,
they call in?
And the priest said when he walked in, the president had already passed. He was laying on the table with the sheet over, and he had to pull the sheet back to perform the last rites. The other priest stayed outside in the hall by Jackie's side and asked a nurse to get a wet towel to wipe the blood off of Jackie's hands and gloves. However, Jackie refused, saying she preferred to keep it that way. So she, in my mind's eye, she's literally holding on to just every drop of him.
Exactly.
Isn't that heartbreaking? Like, you're like, this is the last I have of him. And even I don't want anyone to take it away.
Well, and they talked about, and they had a rocky marriage here and there, and
Sure.
he was known, to be kind of a womanizer, and
she knew that.
Well, but in the months before when they lost their son Patrick, when she went into premature labor, he was in a meeting with some ambassadors, and they got the call, and they're like, Mr. President, your wife's in the hospital, she'll be okay. He's like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
And he went and was right by her side and was really caring through all that and read her poetry and was really sweet. So I think this was kind of like, they started, and they said after going through that, whenever he was going to go on this national tour, she said, I'll go anywhere with you. I just want to be with you. I just want to go anywhere with you.
And even if you didn't have a good marriage, this kind of levels the playing field.
Well, I was going to say, even no matter what, I think they truly did love each other. And he grew up in a family with his very sexually dysfunctional family with his father having sex with women while they had dinner at the dinner table. And his dad did a fucking number on him
promoting
and all those kids.
Infidelity.
Yeah.
And
Joe Kennedy whored around, and that's all the kids knew. But I think that Jack really did love Jackie. But I think, in this case, she really, and like you said, any fights or infidelity or any shit that they had, it fell by the wayside.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, at 1 p.m., JFK was pronounced dead. However, for safety reasons, his death would not be announced to the public until LBJ had safely returned to Air Force One. At approximately 1:26 p.m., LBJ left the hospital to head back to Air Force One. While Jackie was supposed to accompany him, she refused to leave the hospital without her husband's remains. I would have been a goddamn mess. I mean, they would have picked me up off the floor. And she's like walking on her own accord, still making like chit chat with the hospital staff.
Well, if you look at like pictures of her, I just feel like there's like this like resolve behind her eyes where she's like, I know someone did this to him.
Yeah. And she's all, but at the same time, you're like, wow, well, I was here with my husband. He's no longer the president. Now the vice president's getting sworn in. Where do I fit into this equation? Where am I even going to sleep when I get back to D.C.?
They're not going to kick you out immediately.
No, but
they have to give you 30 days eviction notice at the White House.
It's just you no longer have that. You're not even the same person that you were when you arrived.
You got to go home and tell your kids who he was super close to Caroline. Go, Daddy ain't coming home.
Yeah. Oh, those poor kids. Well, the Kennedy team wanted to take JFK's body back to D.C. to have the autopsy performed, but the Dallas County coroner, Earl Rose, believed he was obligated to perform it. Ultimately, the Secret Service won out, and at 2 p.m., the bronze casket carrying Kennedy's body was transported to Love Field and loaded onto Air Force One.
Yeah, this is the guy I was telling you about, where they, like, the Secret Service literally shoved him out of the way.
Get the fuck out of the way.
They're like, we don't have to tell you anything. We're not doing anything. Get out.
Yeah. And the one of the men that worked from the funeral home that brought the casket helped load his body on, and he was like, my hands were covered in JFK's blood. I mean, there was not anything done to repair him before they put him in the casket. It was just like how he was when he showed up was how he left that hospital.
Wow.
And the same man said that Jackie took off her wedding band and put it on JFK's hand and kissed his hand in his mouth, and the body was still warm.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, it's so upsetting to think
She's
about.
going through so much.
Yeah. Also, when they got him to Air Force One, the flight crew of Air Force One, out of respect, would not put him in the hull. So they had the door removed to the main body of the plane and took out rows of seats so they could load the casket into the main body of the plane. And Jackie just sat in the back with him and had her hand on the casket the whole way back to D.C. Yeah. Well, at 1:33...
That woman is a hero.
Yeah, yes. At 1:33 p.m., Malcolm Kilduff, acting White House press secretary, announced to a room full of reporters that the President of the United States was dead.
Have you seen you've seen the Walter Cronkite footage?
Yes.
And
classic.
He's just, first of all, a classic voice of American journalism. But just that, when he takes his glasses off and just puts his hands on his eyes and he's like, he was pronounced dead. I mean, can you believe that? That was the first time. I mean, he's like, I just pulled it off the teletype machine and then looked at it and was like, I have to tell everybody.
Yeah. I was watching an interview with him, and he said, people will ask me, was I embarrassed that I showed emotion? And he says, no, I think I, did a great job of not showing more emotion.
Yeah, not losing
having to report this. But also, he was like, I'm human.
Yeah.
I'm reporting that our president has just been killed.
If you want no emotion, then just put the print up on screen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the footage of WFAA, which is a local news station here in Dallas, of them reporting it too. What's so crazy is all of the people are smoking
on TV.
Isn't that why? I was watching this, and that's what stood out to me. I'm like, everyone is smoking, and it was so like
everyone smoked all the time forever.
Yes, it was so conversational in a kind of unprofessional way. How they would somebody would just bring a piece of paper and they would just kind of cover the mic and be like, "Are you sure this is what's happening?" Before it was, but I think everyone was in such shock and panic that this was happening that there was no...
They're like, give me a cigarette,
There was
Susie.
no playbook on how to do something like this. Yeah, but it is crazy how they were all smoking. And when we get to Oswald,
60s,
it was crazy how much press had access to him and how much he was speaking to the press with no lawyer present and just openly talking.
I am a patsy.
Yes. Well, back on Air Force One, Johnson insisted that he be sworn as president before taking off. And at 2:38 p.m., with Jackie by his side to bear witness, he was sworn in as the new president of the United States.
Unless I'm completely wrong, I believe he was sworn in by Sarah T. Hughes.
He was.
Which is a famous female judge in Texas.
And a friend of the Johnsons.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a scholarship at SMU in her honor.
Oh. So one of the documentaries I was watching kind of paints the Johnson camp as being insensitive to the Kennedys once this whole swearing in takes place. He gets to Air Force One before Jackie does because she's waiting for the body to be transported. And some reports say that they were very irritated that Jackie was running behind and not showing up because he wanted this to take place very quickly. And then she gets there and has to just stand there and be the witness while this is happening. And then they all kind of were like, okay, and just left her alone. And she was just in the back of the cabin with her hand on the coffin the whole way back while the Johnson camp is now just trying to get everything rolling.
I will, again, I have a big heart. I really am pro LBJ for a lot of reasons. And I think that if you think they didn't know who did it. at this point.
No.
What if it's the Soviets? What if we're about to go to war?
No, Johnson wanted to get back to D.C.
He's like, we need to fucking get back. He's like, I need to join Chiefs.
Get
I
this
need
fucking plane back.
So I don't think it was like, all right, bitch, stop being sad. It was like, I love you. I'm sorry. You have to get on the plane. We have to go.
Yeah.
Because the country's in crisis. Like we were saying off air before we started recording. Like, if something like this happened in the modern age, it would be fucking mass chaos.
Oh yeah,
it's mass chaos.
Definitely. I don't even want to think about what would happen. Well, meanwhile, back at Dealey Plaza, the scene was full of chaos, confusion, terror, and grief. No one was entirely sure what had just happened. Some thought the shots had come from behind the grassy knoll, while others were convinced they came from the book depository. Howard Brennan had been watching the motorcade across the street from the book depository when he heard the first shot come from above. He told police he looked up and saw a man with a rifle leaning out of the northwest window of the 6th floor. He said he had just seen the same man looking out it minutes before. 2 employees of the book depository told police they had been watching from the southeast corner of the 5th floor when they heard shots being fired from above them and the sound of cartridges dropping on the floor above them. When Lee Harvey Oswald's supervisor at the depository reported him missing to the police, an APB was put out with his description and the manhunt began. What's crazy is one of the officers that went into the book depository ran into Oswald, and the manager was like, he's fine, he's an employee, and they just let him go.
Pardon me, sir.
Yeah. But the officer said he didn't seem out of breath or irritated, or, like flustered, like he had just fucking shot the president or anything.
He was a CIA operative.
He just walked out.
Following orders.
Is that what your
I have a whole theory. He did not. He was not.
Her eyes just lit up like a kid on Christmas.
He was not the trigger man, but he was part. Yeah.
Well, he was a patsy, essentially.
He was a patsy.
Yes. Police immediately began to search the book depository and soon found what they believed to be the rifle that had been used to shoot the president and governor.
They would be wrong. That is not the rifle.
Next to the rifle was some chicken.
Hell yeah.
Because, you're there for a while.
You get a little hungry.
And several soft drinks, indicating the shooter had been posting up there for a while. It would later be determined, again, this is what the Warren Commission says. Allegedly, that Oswald had bought the rifle from a Chicago mail-order house for $12.78. Okay, he didn't. But isn't it crazy that you could buy a gun?
You can mail order a gun. You stand in a freaking couple of bucks.
You can do that right now?
No, you can buy it on the internet.
Yeah, on the dark web.
Well,
but
you go to a gun show and there's a man with a table in Mesquite at the Mesquite
all the time.
Big Town Mall.
All the time. There's that billboard right off 30. There's a constant gun show happening in Mesquite.
And Mesquite is the suburb of Dallas where I'm from.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Go get you a gun.
Well, a few miles away in the neighborhood of Oak Cliff, which is a great neighborhood, by the way.
It is. Those houses are beautiful. Mm-hmm. Barbecue.
Officer J.D. Tippett spotted Oswald walking down the street. He had received the suspect's description over his radio and called Oswald over to his squad car. Helen Markham, an eyewitness, later testified that after the 2 men exchanged words, Tippett got out of his car and Oswald proceeded to shoot him 4 times. Officer Tippett would not survive.
So I think Oswald... Or
I think he did this.
An Oswald impersonator.
Lookalike?
There are 2 Oswalds. We'll get into it in the next episode.
Uh-oh.
The book that I have been listening to that is ungodly in length. It is so long, and
What's it called?
It's called. Oh shit! I was just listening to it before we started recording because it's about like the background, and it's called JFK and the Unspeakable by James W. Douglas, and it's a lot about. I only have 2 hours and 42 minutes remaining. I can make it.
That's some length of an audiobook in its
Welcome
entirety.
to Heather McKinney's world, where it's an 18-hour audiobook, and I listened to it on 1.75 speed.
Oh, nice.
But that whole book is like considered like one of the best researched books, and there was a guy rolling around Dallas that looked like Lee Harvey Oswald that was making the splashes at multiple places, like at a gun range, and he's like waving a gun around, and he's like yelling about going back to Russia at a car dealership. Basically, there's a guy, and Oswald's just a basic ass looking white dude. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to find somebody that looked like him. So I think that was fake Oswald that shot the officer.
Interesting.
We'll get into it in the next episode.
Well, a manager of a nearby store also witnessed the shooting and then saw Oswald, or fake Oswald, sneak into the Texas Theater.
Oswald.
Sneak into the Texas Theater, which is a great theater here, also haunted, without paying.
The cops.
He called the theater, who then called the police. When police arrived, they discovered an agitated Lee Harvey Oswald. As he resisted arrest, he was heard yelling, "Well, it's all over now." Well, what does that mean?
The jig is up.
Roughly 70 minutes from the first shot being fired, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the murder of JFK and Officer Tippit.
Shout out to Jamie McCraw, who's in my Watermelon Improv troupe, whose dad was an usher this day at the Texas Theater.
He was there when this went down?
Mm-hmm. He said it was just like some guy walked in without a ticket, and he's like, I think he was a teenager or early 20s and was just like,
he also had a gun.
Yeah,
because he, apparently when he was resisting arrest, some people said he tried to pull the gun on the officers as well.
So,
well, Oswald vehemently denied shooting anyone and repeatedly claimed that he was a patsy and was being targeted because he used to live in the Soviet Union.
We got a lot to cover on the next episode.
Yes, and he did used to live in the Soviet Union.
He did.
And just a few weeks prior, he'd been arrested in New Orleans and given a $10 fine for distributing communist
literature
propaganda. Yes,
we got a lot to cover.
2 days later, at 11:21 a.m., Oswald was being escorted to a car in the basement of Dallas City Hall to be taken to the county jail when Jack Ruby, owner of the Carousel nightclub, fatally shot him on live TV. Oswald was immediately taken by ambulance to Parkland Hospital, where just 2 days earlier, doctors had tried to save President Kennedy's life. He was pronounced dead at 1:07 p.m.
It's just such a strange string of events.
Yes. I mean,
when you find the truth out, when you find out the truth.
This is where it gets, most people say those that believe in conspiracy theories are nuts. To me, in this situation, if you don't believe in a conspiracy theory, you're the nut here.
Well, if you believe the Warren Commission, which again, it's so problematic, the people on it were the people that wanted this to happen.
Yeah.
So of course they're going to cover it up.
Sure.
But this is one of the next, first of all, the whole shooting and autopsy, etc. But then why would a well-known mafioso shoot this guy? Why were the cops walking him through an area where there was access? Well, it's
and apparently, supposedly, the only people that were allowed down in that basement were reporters or people that had ID, and others thought Ruby was a CIA agent.
Yeah,
they thought he was Secret Service. So, but he would have had to have shown some sort of ID if he was going to be down there, or would he? Because they want him down there to take the fall for this.
I think. Well, usually in a police sally port, it's totally closed off to anybody that's not official. But I don't think the CIA and the mafia worked closely together.
And Ruby was in the mafia.
Well, yeah, he was well connected in organized crime. So, and they said that a guy in, I think it was a guy in New Orleans that was an organized crime guy, had some kind of badge that basically.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that there's all sorts of fake stuff that would get him down there. Well, Ruby later claimed that he was distraught over the Kennedy assassination and that killing Oswald would spare Mrs. Kennedy the discomfiture of coming back to trial.
They sold that gun later on. Jack Ruby's gun.
Oh, yeah?
His brother sold it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. He sold it for $100,000.
That's
He's
disgusting.
People say I'm profiting off of a tragedy, but...
And those people are right. That's exactly what you're doing.
You have no rebuttal.
Yeah. However, none of the DPD believed Oswald was killed due to political fervor, but rather so he couldn't talk. So at this point, even the cops are like, oh, wait a minute. I honestly think if Oswald hadn't been shot, he would have run his mouth and blown everything. But this is what was the first red flag, that this is a fucking conspiracy and a cover-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there probably was a different way they could have killed him that would have been a little more under the radar. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, the autopsy, we've spoken of that a few times. At 8 p.m. that evening, the autopsy of JFK's body was performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital. It would last more than 4 hours. Bobby Kennedy, who was now by Jackie's side, and Jackie were concerned that because such an extensive autopsy was being performed, that the drugs JFK had been taking for various health problems would be discovered, tainting his public image, because he was a very sickly man.
He was the pictures you see of him, he's always tan.
He's wearing
smiling.
a lot of makeup.
He's tan, he's smiling, he's laughing. He was decrepit.
He was circling the drain.
I mean, no joke. He had Addison's disease. He had advanced syphilis. They said he had horrible back problems.
Very sickly child. He had scarlet fever.
He had recurring malaria after he came back from World War II. I mean, he was constantly
very
ill.
bad back pain.
I will also address one of my mom's favorite television shows was like like JFK's doctor, and they called him Dr. Feelgood, and eventually he stopped going to see that guy. But before he did, and of course, obviously the Secret Service and like the White House people really didn't like this guy, but he had these like famous injections that he would give JFK and JFK's like, I feel great. I feel totally.
What is it, morphine?
Yeah, well, okay. So the thing that he injected, basically it was amphetamines.
Yeah.
Like they talked about,
I'd feel great too.
It had a mixture of like amphetamines, vitamins, B12, morphine. It would get you high and even you out. I mean, it was a nice little cocktail. And there was human like placenta in it too. I mean, it was insane. But JFK was quoted as saying, "I don't care if it's horse piss, it makes me feel great." But then eventually they're like, "Mr. President, you're fucking high and you're making insane choices.
Yeah.
We can't." And luckily early in his presidency, they banned that guy and they got real doctors in the White House. Because they were concerned that JFK was going to get all jacked up on these amphetamines and be like, let's bomb Russia. And so luckily
like our current fucking president.
Maybe he's seeing Dr. Feelgood. We don't know.
Well, they were concerned that this information about the drugs would get out. What they didn't realize is that nothing was going to get out from that autopsy.
There was a naval photographer there taking pictures.
Like the assassination, much controversy and conspiracy surrounds the autopsy. Was it even the same body? Why did the military confiscate all the x-rays and replace the pictures with artist impression?
Why is the photographer who took video and photos, and he worked for the Navy, he was a member of the Navy, right after he retired from the Navy, was found shot in the head at his office?
To cast even more suspicion, to this day, no one knows what happened to JFK's brain.
Jesus.
Because of all this, many believe the Warren Commission reached its conclusions based on falsified evidence, furthering the belief that this entire operation was a government conspiracy and cover-up.
It absolutely was.
And we are going to get into all of them on our next episode.
There's so much to cover. I don't even know how.
Some are, yes, this probably happened, and some are, okay, this is crazy, but fun.
Yeah. But I think, you always say, what do we think, Heather? And we'll get into it in the next episode. The CIA did it.
I totally agree. I think that the CIA was trying to get rid of him because of his beliefs and opinions on Cuba and or on Russia and nuclear, Cuba. Yeah, just nuclear weapons in general.
He wanted total nuclear disarmament, and they were like, but we want a war because it makes money for us.
Yes.
And he wanted to get out of Vietnam, and the military-industrial complex very much wanted to go in further in Vietnam. So
it's always interesting when people are like, our government could never do something like that. Sheeple. You have no idea what our government is capable of.
No joke. And when you really do, this book I'm telling you that I'm reading, it's incredibly well researched. It's all based on, it came out after the release of a ton of documents. So that's why, I mean, they've pieced all this together, and it's nothing in it is like, it was the aliens, which I know I jokingly said the alien. They
poisoned shrimp dart.
Yeah, they shot him with a shrimp dart. No, it's generally like and there's also the video that Oliver Stone, or the behind the scenes of the Oliver Stone movie, that deaf guy that was on the bridge, and he witnessed.
His dad witnessed it and then told him about it. Yeah.
Anyway.
That's so crazy watching that. Because, first of all, watching anyone do sign language is just beautiful to me, because you are not just hearing the words, but you're like seeing this like acted out, and just the like emotion and expression that comes from the signing. And it's really fascinating to see him sign how his dad relayed him seeing the president get his head blow up.
Yeah.
But not only that, but then turning around and seeing a man with a rifle walk over to the railroad tracks, pack it away,
and hand it to
hand it to another man,
and walk away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into all of that and more.
So much
on
more.
the next one. I'm very the JF when I was in middle school and was in soccer, anytime it was raining and we couldn't practice, our coach would take us in the office and have us watch JFK conspiracy documentaries. That was,
are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. That was where I was first introduced to like the Zapruder film and ever since then I've just been fascinated with it because it is one of those things that like everyone knows something crazy happened, but no one really knows what happened. But it's just, it was for the whole world to see.
That's wild.
You do it in broad daylight. That's when they least suspect it.
It is insane. So, all right. Well, some shout outs. We want to shout out Liz from Dallas, who runs the Karen Kilgar Instagram fan account. She started following us and sent us a really cool message.
Oh, nice.
She's listening and she said she remembers that Albertsons when it opened and they had flags out. I was like, girl, you were there.
Whoa,
girl,
God.
you were at the
that
scene
is
of the crime.
That is my legacy. I will be known for nothing else except that I shit in my car in Albertsons parking lot. I can't wait for Ella to get old enough to be like, that was my mom.
Mommy, that's embarrassing. I would also like to shout out Elise from Philadelphia. When I visited her, she gave me 2 really good books about local Philly legends and murders. One is like a haunted hotel and one's like an unsolved murder.
Oh, and so much political haunting too there.
Yeah.
Did you go on your food tour?
Oh my gosh. Super shout out to Chew Philly Food Tour. If you weren't planning on going to Philadelphia, go to that place and it's Chew Philly. I think it's called phillyfoodtours.com, but it's like chew, like what Christy hates to hear Tommy do. And we did I did the Chestnut Hill food tour, and I had this sandwich that is called a Schmitter.
Whoa.
And it's from McNally's Tavern, and there's a picture of it on my Instagram. It is I think back on the sandwich like an old lover. I salivate at the thought.
What was on it?
It's like a roast beef that's cooked it's like almost like a slow cooked skirt steak, cooked salami with onions, and I don't like tomato, but it had a thick slice of tomato with some seasoning on it, and then like gooey cheese, and then this gooey it's almost like a Thousand Island dressing.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the tour, Elise is like, I get it if you have like a food allergy or you like get ill, but she's like, if you just think like, oh, I don't like X, like I just don't like tomatoes. She's like, take it, put it aside for the tour, and just be open to it. And I'm so glad I did, because this sandwich, like I said, and the Chestnut Hill Cheese Shop, even though the guy that runs it is a fucking Eagles fan, that's fine. We'll forgive him, because I had this cheese with this like truffle stripe through the middle. You can order the Chestnut Hill Cheese Shop website.
Big fan of truffle.
Get their cheddar with the truffle in the middle, and tell them.
Was it all gluten free?
Yeah.
And she did it. The
sandwich had a gluten-free bread, and she made sure that if you're vegetarian, gluten-free, whatever, she makes sure that there's like a version of things for you.
Awesome.
Like the Schmitter, there's like a vegetarian version. It's called like the George Bernard Shaw, so it's like similar flavors but with no meat, obviously.
Oh, my husband's a vegetarian, so we can both go on this and still enjoy ourselves.
We're not sponsored by Chew Philly, but we should be.
If you want to.
I'm just very obsessed with that sandwich.
It sounds delicious.
And also, I would love to shout out Christy for this freaking outline is so good. She does so much work.
You do so much work.
I know, but
Heather just closed a $1 deal last week and was
$1.25 billion
and was very busy and still makes time to do all of this. And I was telling Tommy the other day, I was like, every second of Heather's day is accounted for.
That is correct.
like most people, if you were like, oh, I have to record my podcast tonight, that's all you would do. But you're like, all right, after we get through here, I'm going to run up to CBC because I have such and such's birthday party. Then after that, I have to do some more work. Like every second of your day is filled with something. I don't know when you sleep. I don't know if you do sleep.
It's very pleasant to me at the end of the night when I'm like, oh, I have like some time. I can do anything I want. I will say the one thing that I account for in the morning and I don't skip is my meditation. So I meditate every morning and watch King of the Hill every night.
And you have those two things, and those bookends.
I draw on my iPad while I watch King of the Hill.
That's great. Well, I admire you and appreciate how much you do for your friends and how much time you make for all of us.
Always. And you know what? You guys can make time for us by going on iTunes and rating us.
Segue.
Get us a 5-star rating, review us. Subscribe or wherever you listen on Spotify or Stitcher or wherever. Tell a friend, more importantly. Tag us in a post. Share us on social media. It means a ton to us, and it's the way that more people start to listen to us, and that would be great if just everyone listened all the time.
Yes, it certainly would. Speaking of how you can tag us, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Sinisterhood Pod. You can also like us on Facebook at Sinisterhood. Heather, where can they find you?
If you want to see a picture of that fucking fat good sandwich, it's at Heather VS The World on Instagram and at MCK VS The World on Twitter.
If you want to see pictures of my wonderful daughter, you can follow me on Instagram at Christy M. Wallace or Twitter at Christy or GTFO.
I also have a picture of your daughter on my Instagram, and Norman, famous Norman.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Plocks for bringing their super cute babe.
Yeah. Heather has got a lot of babe time. Also, my daughter, Heather and I were both at a Friendsgiving yesterday, and Ella picked up 2 giant chocolate chip cookies from the table and just shoved them into her mouth. She's not even a year. She's not supposed to have that kind of stuff. But did we stop her? No, because it was funny and everyone was laughing and everyone would take video of it. So there is a picture on my Instagram currently where she looks like we all look when we first had a chocolate chip cookie. And it's very funny.
Just going to town.
Well, as always, the devil rules the airwaves.
Keep it creepy.
Sinisterhood.